So how can you make money in stocks from other people's ideas? This is how. Hi, this is Fabi from The Next Big Rush, where we talk about growing your wealth through smart investing. If this is you, then hit the subscribe button down below and the little bell right next to it so you can catch some of my best videos, most of which are still to come. Okay, so today we're talking about how to find stocks to invest in. And this is video number 3 out of this series. If you haven't watched any of the previous videos, then click on the little banner that's coming up right here, right now, so that you can follow along and this will make a lot more sense. If you have watched the previous videos, then today's video is mostly about how to make money from other people's ideas. Something I am really happy to recommend because I don't need to be the smart person who finds the biggest and greatest and newest idea. I'm okay with being fairly late to the news as long as the price hasn't moved yet, so that I can basically borrow other people's brains, figure out if that fits my investment criteria, and then profit from it. Okay, so one of the things that I told you in the last video was it's sometimes a great idea when we go to forums or chat rooms and things like that and we watch the people that are serially successful. I was gonna say seriously successful, but that works as well. So those who are serially and seriously successful, you're gonna see somebody who says, hey, I think this is really undervalued, or I think this is a great buy, I'm buying more of this and that. And then a few months later, you see that that stock goes up by a lot. Granted, some of that is pumping sometimes, so you have to be careful with that, but you will see that people will naturally gravitate towards certain people in a forum or chat room and ask for their advice. That's huge. When everybody's asking for this person's or that person's advice or opinion, it means that they probably know what they're talking about. So once you spend a few months in those chat rooms, you're gonna see who the real guys and girls are, the people who actually know what they're talking about. Once you do that, then the next step is, okay, which of their recommendations is actually worth pursuing? And this is obviously gonna vary according to your thesis and what you want. And I'm sad to say, this is a little bit of a trial and error thing. You know, like I know what type of stocks I want to invest in. I know what their chart needs to look like for me to have confidence to invest in them. I know what the story needs to look like. Maybe you're more of a momentum guy or girl. So try it out. You will lose some money, whether it's investing or trading or whatever, but the most important thing, you do you. Find out what you're good at. Now, here are some of the people that I follow and that maybe you should follow if your investment thesis is somewhat similar to mine, which is high risk, high reward, junior mining stocks. Are you ready for this list? Okay, so write this down. Probably the most famous guru in this arena is Rick Rule. Y'all know the story. Rick Rule started off as a bouncer at a bar, grew up to actually own a bar and I think a few different bars, and today he is, I don't want to say it, but probably a billionaire in this industry. So here's a guy who looks at a lot of different companies. He probably knows the most amount of companies in the junior mining sector and helps to finance the ones that he really likes. If you basically do a search of Rick Rule and the year that we're in, you can find a lot about what Rick Rule is talking about or selling right now. You can also find him on Twitter. Right, on CEO.ca, which is my favorite forum for talking about these stocks, I also follow Pamplona Trader. Just watch the stuff that he's recommended in the past and how they have done. BD Mindfinder. Now this is a hedge fund manager. Doesn't always get it right, but he knows how to make money. A couple of years ago, his hedge fund was, I believe, the most profitable in this sector. You should also take a look and follow Stateside. Now, Stateside has a podcast that talks about Basically, it's a small digest of the news that have happened in the last 1 or 2 weeks, and he's usually very early to a lot of stories. There's also, and I am going to butcher this name, Octillo Redux. Now this is Doug Beatty, and he's a very experienced guy that specializes in uranium and zinc. I believe he's a mining engineer, just such a brain. Anyway, go follow him, whether it's on Twitter or on CEO.ca. Guy really knows his stuff. Another Doug is the Galvanizer, and he also knows, obviously, a lot about zinc, and he's a more hands-on kind of person. Very honest with his opinions about other companies that he's not very much involved in. But he's a guy that usually takes the reign, so to speak, of companies such as in the position of CEO or president. He was very closely involved with Vendetta, which we spoke about here previously. There's another company that he's involved in that I don't want to talk about just yet, but I'm really liking the look of it. Okay, so you could follow these people and try to figure out what they're buying. Obviously, they're gonna tell you what they have already bought, so you can almost always assume that they've bought at a cheaper price than what you're buying. Be careful with that. Don't chase. But there's also newsletter writers, and a lot of people have this negative view with newsletter writers. All I have to tell them is, look, understand what the business model of the newsletter writer is and check their record. It's pretty simple. Most free newsletter writers have to make money somehow, and there's a lot of money to be made in the industry. So what they do is they are sponsored by some of the stocks that they're speaking about to share the news or share comments and opinions with their subscriber base. Some other newsletter writers don't take money at all and just basically have their stock picks, they send it to you, and they try as best as they can to give you a warning before they buy the stock and to give you a warning before they sell the stock. So before you sign up to a newsletter service, figure out, is it free? How do they get paid? If you can find out how much do they get paid, and if they get cheap shares instead of payment for their services. Now, if the service is rendered by a US company or person, you basically go to their website, look for the disclaimer or information tab somewhere in there, or legal blah blah blah, and they're gonna tell you not only who the sponsors are, but a lot of the times they list how much money they're making from those companies. Then you can choose whether to ignore the comments from those companies or not. There are divided opinions on this. I think that a great company usually has some sort of advertising, some sort of promotional side to it. But some companies that don't really have anything to show for have a lot of promotion and no basis for existence. It's up to you to find that out and decide. Now, here are some newsletter writers that I'm familiar with. Some of them I'm sort of buddies with, or follow, or subscribe to. James Quantes is the first one I'm going to talk about briefly. This guy really knows diamonds. So if you're interested in diamonds, I don't know anybody else that you could follow as a newsletter to understand the companies behind them and how to make money from it. Another one that I subscribe to is Marin Katusa. Now, Marin really understands energy, and that includes oil. Most of these other people don't really talk about oil much, or weird metals that I can barely spell. I think that Marin has an edge there, and that's one of the reasons why I follow him. Another great one is the Resource Maven. You can find her on Twitter and on YouTube. Very good with early stage exploration companies as well. Eric Coffin is probably one of the most popular ones. He's the guy behind the Metals Investors Forum that I'm going to talk about in 1 second. And again, very early guy, finds these small companies, exciting junior discovery plays, and he has a lot of successes. Now, if you're more into the technical analysis aspects of the markets, then take a look at The Daily Gold by my friend Jordan Royburn, which is really difficult to pronounce if you try to say it really fast. And he also goes on YouTube quite a bit and explains what he's looking at and all the charting and stuff. For technical analysis, there's also Goldfinger, who's on CEO.ca quite a bit, and he also has a paid service. I've never used it, but a lot of people really enjoy his services and have seen him get stuff right. Okay, so following a few people will give you extra ideas. Obviously, be an adult. Buy when it's low, sell when it's high. Don't expect everybody to hold your hand throughout the whole process. But you know, there is money to be made by following people who have an area of expertise where you don't have. Take a guy like Doug, Octillo Redux. Here's a mining engineer. If I am looking at results from a company drilling for zinc, I may not understand it, because not only do I have to understand what the geology says, but also how are they gonna get the stuff out of the ground. So he's looking forward maybe 2 or 3 steps. I'd rather bet money on what a guy like that thinks than what I think. I'm not ashamed to say it. Next tip is go to live events. I cannot recommend this enough. I have been to 3 live events so far. I am dying of envy for all the people heading out to the Sprott Symposium that is going to be happening right now in July, mid-July. That's when it happens. Fortunately, I am selling my home and I have to stay here for viewings and incredibly boring stuff, while all of you are going to be hanging out with very intelligent people, great companies that are recommended by Sprott. And Vancouver in July, need I say more. So that's something that happens, I believe, every July is the Sprott Symposium. I am hopefully going to the next one. Don't think I'm gonna make it to this one. There's also the MIF, which I've spoken about before, which is the Metals Investor Forum by Eric Coffin. And this happens, I believe, 4 times a year. I've been to 2 of them so far. Highly recommend it. And the reason why I recommend going to events such as these smaller ones like the MIF is that you get to hear the gossip about the companies that you wouldn't otherwise hear. And you get to meet the CEOs and the people running the show. And gossip, just to clarify, is not insider information. Gossip is just basically the feel of the room or the explanation behind something that you may not know because it's not material information and doesn't get published by the company. For example, there is one particular company that I really enjoy and own, and people were worried over a large investor having backed out. Now, after going to MIF, I actually found out who this investor was and why he backed out, which was not a reason for me to back out of my investment. So that really gave me a lot of peace about my decision. Let's talk about a few other events. There's also PDAC, PDAC, that happens usually in the first week of March in Toronto. I was there this year, loved it. But the thing with PDAC is that it's huge. And unless you have a plan to go visit certain companies, you will miss a lot of them. There is also Beaver Creek, which I believe happens every fall in Beaver Creek. And it's a very different event. I've never been to it, but some of my friends have. And what they say is it's a very professional kind of event. So people who go are analysts and hedge fund managers and people who actually have this as their main job, not just private investors like you and me. Just Google precious metals or mining investment conference and you're gonna see a few options. Hey, before you go, question of the day. Have you followed or do you still follow any one of these people that I have mentioned? Right down here below. That's it. Have fun. You can learn a lot and make a lot of money by following these tips. If you like this video, hit like and subscribe because there's a lot more coming your way. Take care.